We're going to record it. Okay, perfect. So we're recording now. And for those of you who cannot make it live, this is going to be something that you can refer to time and time again. And then hopefully the whole intent of this is that it opens up a conversation, it opens up ideas for all of us who work in the non-traditional yoga studio setting to be able to ask questions, get some feedback, figure out what we're all here to do, and learn from each other. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, and then I want to address some of the poll questions that I asked in the poll and kind of go through those topics. So I teach adaptive yoga in Colorado Springs and Denver. I'm mostly on the western side of Denver, all the way from Arvada, Wheat Ridge, Lakewood, Littleton, Highlands Ranch, Centennial, Inglewood, and then I shift kind of over into Parker and then into Castle Rock. So the populations that I'm serving are currently, I would say, 70% traumatic brain injuries and 30% dementia. And I say that because there's a lot of dual diagnosis, and I also have homes in the spring. So when I say the word homes, these are assisted living 24/7 total support, but they are $1 million homes in neighborhoods that you and I live in. So you might even not even know that there are group homes or assisted living in the neighborhood that you live in, but I'll tell you that there are. They are there. So we think in the terms of assisted living as someplace our grandparents lived at the end of their life in a facility, and in the culture of um, long-term care assisted living, they're really moving away from the term facility into community. So currently, I'm contracted with 29 communities in Southern Denver and Colorado Springs, serving adults with traumatic brain injuries or dementia, Alzheimer's, or other neurological diagnoses. Some of my students have diagnoses that look like Lou Gehrig's or ALS or MS at the end stage. But most of my students are living with Alzheimer's or dementia or traumatic brain injuries. So the houses are sort of segregated into, this is a TBI home, this is a dementia home. Okay, so I just want to be clear, like, that's the population I'm serving. And it's not a facility that we might think of when we think of long-term care centers. There's really, I mean, there are obviously nursing homes and assisted living facilities, communities, but these are homes in everyday neighborhoods, in communities where children play in the streets. There's a park next door. There are communities in which people live that you and I also live. And so that's something really important to be thinking about when you're thinking about who you want to serve going forward as an adaptive yoga teacher, because it's not always going to be clinical settings. Okay. So I've been teaching yoga to this population for 16 years. And my background is I'm a mom of a girl who will be turning 29 very soon, who was diagnosed at early age as being on the autism spectrum and having developmental disability. And it wasn't until she was 17 or 18, right around that time, 16, 17, 18, that she was actually diagnosed with a genetic syndrome that's a microdeletion of one of her chromosomes. And the geneticist told me that many people who are diagnosed with autism would likely have this genetic anomaly or another genetic mutation that's not yet been discovered. And as far advanced as we are in medicine, genetics is very slow. It's like a turtle's pace as to what we're looking at when we compare it to other sort of modalities in the medicine field. So genetics is slow. And she's been genetically tested since the time she was 4, and nothing showed up until she was 17, 18, something like that. And that gave us just a bird's eye view into who she was. Not that it changed any of her therapies or how we interacted with her. It was just kind of an answer to all the unknowns that we had for the first 16, 17 years of her life. Back when she was 10, I found a training in Seattle that used yoga as a modality for kids on the autism spectrum in conjunction with occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. And I thought this would be the gap. This would be what bridges us together. This would bring her to me. This would help her connect to me. And I came home and she was like, I'm not doing that. I'm so not doing that. And so I sat with it for a while and I went back to Seattle, and I had had my basic yoga training at that point, but it was just very, very basic, like super basic. And so I went back and I learned how to use the same method for adults with disabilities. And that could be a spectrum of disabilities. It could be developmental, physical, cognitive, just an array of disabilities. I even learned methods on how to teach people at the end of life, like hospice yoga. And so I felt so empowered with what I had learned that I came back to my hometown in Colorado Springs, and I went to the therapeutic rec program that's ran by the city. So we have softball leagues and soccer leagues. And then there's this little section on the website that has to do with therapeutic recreation. And this is getting people with disabilities of all types, whether it's developmental or physical, to be active in sports and recreation. And they didn't have a yoga program at that time. They didn't have anything in the holistic medicine, kind of holistic wellness realm. They had a lot of activities physically, but nothing really to connect mind, body, spirit. So I knocked on their door and I said, I have some tools, I have some training, I'd love to give it a try. And I ended up volunteering for 4 years, which sort of has inspired me to start this group because I've come across some pushback from yoga teachers who feel that their investment in their studies and in their time invested should then reap a financial benefit that matches their investment. And I always like to say that it took 4 years of volunteering my time to gain experience, to gain validity, to gain reputation, to gain consistency, to learn from my students, to gain a sequence that makes sense to how do I structure my class, that it took 4 years of working with people who had Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, traumatic brain injuries, Down syndrome, autism, other genetic anomalies, all in one group. And how do I teach to somebody who's completely paralyzed, to amputated from the waist down, to Down syndrome, to autism, to another genetic syndrome I know nothing about? How do I group all of these people into one class and make it meaningful and functional? And so it took 4 years of me figuring that out as a volunteer and gaining a lot of tools along the way. And so I feel like starting this group, I want to hand over some of those tools to you so that you can go into your community and say, I'm a yoga teacher, and now I have some tools and some tricks and some tips, and I feel empowered and strong enough to do this. It's so scary to walk into a nursing home, long-term care facility, group home, community, and say, here's what I know and here's how I can do it. So I'm hoping that people will learn from my mistakes and from my experience and from the things that I've learned along the way, but then also be willing to take their own unique style and be empowered to say, it's not that scary. I can do this. So I started volunteering. I did that for 4 years. And the news station, the local news station, happened to do just a spot feature on the therapeutic rec program, not the yoga program, but just the totality of here's this program for people with disabilities in our community. And they came and filmed yoga. And within 24 hours, I had different agencies reaching out to me saying, can you bring yoga into our long-term care center, to our assisted living, to our senior day program? And so I started on the senior side working with the population of 55 and up who are low income seniors in the community. So they don't have access to things like the YMCA, even though they qualify for silver sneakers, they don't have transportation to get there, or they don't have caregivers to help them navigate a locker room or to navigate a group setting in a class where they might need assistance in an aerobics class. So this population simply went to a day center and they were provided a hot meal or two, snacks, crafts, entertainment, exercise, physical therapy, things like that. Doctors were on staff. And so I just swept in and taught a yoga class 3 days a week. The umbrella of this company also had a traumatic brain injury section where they had an assisted living facility, true nursing home style, 28 bed, 24/7 care. That then they said, could you please come and teach yoga to these guys? So I started on the senior side, low income seniors with limited access to community involvement. And I moved into traumatic brain injury side where it was 28 beds of people under the age of 40, I would say, that had sustained a traumatic brain injury from an accident, an assault. It was rare in this particular facility for me to find somebody who had like a brain tumor or an aneurysm. This was typically the result of an accident or an injury. Okay, so I started doing that. And then from that sector of population, I developed private students because family members or guardians found out about the work that I did and they said, hey, I want to hire you one on one. So it took some time for me to go from being a fully employed job. I had a job in the school district working full time in special education to teaching yoga a couple days a week. I taught at a gym. I taught typical yoga, vinyasa flow, to fine tuning and honing in to the niche that I feel I'm here to do. And I no longer teach in a gym setting. I don't teach in a studio. I have a studio, but I only teach one night a week in my studio for typical people. And the rest of my work is community based. So I take yoga to the facility. And there's a couple reasons why I feel so empowered to do that, but that will come in time. Like you'll start to get to know me through these monthly meetings, through questions that I might pose in the group, through meeting one-on-one with people who are interested to learn more. But there's some differences between accessible yoga, which is trademarked and beautifully curated from a gentleman who has developed trainings and written books, and you can be accessible yoga trained through him. And he's phenomenal. And what he does is he takes a traditional yoga practice, a vinyasa flow yoga practice, and turns it into how do I adapt that to a chair? How do I adapt that to somebody who has limited mobility, whether it's from obesity or disability or arthritis? Like there's a spectrum of ways that he's able to take a sun salutation flow and turn it into a chair practice. It's beautiful. There's a place for that. I think anybody who teaches in this population should definitely get his book. I have it. I've learned from it. I think his Instagram posts and videos are phenomenal. So accessible yoga is what his passion. Okay. Then there's another organization called Love Your Brain. And this was developed by a young man who is a professional skier who sustained a traumatic brain injury. And he found yoga and meditation to be part of his healing modality through this change in his experience. And he started this foundation where they have people who live with traumatic brain injuries able to access studios in the community who will teach a class trained by somebody through their program. So their program is called Love Your Brain Yoga. And in order to teach a Love Your Brain class, you have to be trained through Love Your Brain. Totally great. I think it's amazing that people who are living with traumatic brain injuries can walk into a Denver studio or anywhere, if it's available, on a certain day or time and take a yoga class trained by somebody who understands the brain. Okay. Two different, very important, and much needed services for the world. My offering to the world is neither of those. They're very different. I walk into a group home or a community, a facility, whatever word you want to call it. And these are people who are living with profound traumatic brain injuries where they cannot access Love Your Brain because they don't have ability, they don't have transportation, they don't have funding, they don't have support. They can't get there for whatever barrier that they're experiencing. And they could certainly practice accessible yoga through a YouTube presentation of chair yoga. But my students who are living in these assisted living group homes, 24/7 care, many of them are paralyzed from the neck down. One side of their body is completely paralyzed. They're they have such a degenerative disease in their brain that they can't access the community. So my passion and mission has been to bring yoga to them, to go into the facilities and say, here I am, let's go, let's do 35, 40 minutes together. So there's the difference between adaptive yoga, where I take traditional sun salutation and I modify it to a chair. There's Love Your Brain yoga, which is amazing. And it takes people who have traumatic brain injuries who are more higher functioning, which I hate the word higher functioning, but they're more able to access the community than students that I see. So I feel like there's a couple tiers into this world of accessible, adaptive yoga. And I just want to make sure that the people in this group understand that the people that I'm serving are either so profoundly impacted by a traumatic brain injury that they're not able to access the community. And a traumatic brain injury needs a very different skill set than just watching an adaptive yoga video. They're not going to be able to track and comprehend and internalize and then mimic the motions that they see on a screen. It's just part of the brain injury. It's very unlikely that that's going to be something that works for them. And then the other population that I serve are people anywhere from 60 years old and up to over 100 who have dementia or Alzheimer's. They're not able to access a studio. They're not able to access adaptive yoga through modified postures of a sun salutation. So when I come into a facility, what I offer looks very, very different than something from the accessible yoga that's beautiful, modifying a traditional practice, and Love Your Brain, which is geared towards bringing people from the community into a studio. So I knock on a door and I say, I'm here for yoga. Most of the people that I come into the home are sitting in recliners under a blanket. Their hands are tucked in their blanket like this, and they're watching television. My job then is to get the hands out of the blanket and the TV turned off. And when I posed the question on the poll, like, how do you structure a class? I wanted to ask that question to see who wants to know, how do I structure a class? Because it goes all the way back to our 200-hour teacher training, where I hope we all learned how to read the room. Okay. We hear that a lot in teacher training, 200-hour, read the room, read the room. Well, in my studio, just this week, I had 5 people come to class. 4 of them have had knee replacements, and the other person has a significant spine injury. So the plan that I had in my head goes totally out the window when I read the room, right? I know that there is not going to be any tabletop position, no cat and cow on an all fours position because of my knee replacements. And then I know that for my spine student, I'm not going to be doing a lot of twists. I'm not going to be doing anything that's going to cause that spine to cause some reaction. Okay. So the same thing happens when we walk into a long-term care facility, community, group home. All of those are interchangeable. I knock on the door and I might have anywhere from 4 to 10 people with dementia or traumatic brain injuries. I got to read the room. Depending on who shows up in that class, totally changes how I structure it. But I will say I have a basic foundation for what I do in any given class. Okay. So I walk in and I have a Pilates ball. I don't have one in my office. I'm in my office, not my studio, but I have a Pilates ball. And I walk into the room. It's usually a living room. And so that's the first indicator that this is different. I'm not in a studio. I'm not in a big open space where there's no furniture and we're just sitting. Even if we're sitting in chairs, it's not like that. I walk into a literal living room where recliners cover the space. It's wall to wall recliners. Or I walk into a group home for people with brain injuries and it's leather furniture and a coffee table. I have to read the room and figure out how I'm going to engage this person in a wheelchair, this person who's an amputee, this person who has significant PTSD, and this person who has no language. So, and this person over here has no vision from his injury. How do I engage all of these people into a practice in the middle of a living room on a coffee table? So it takes that moment where you assess where you are teaching and who you are teaching. So when I walk into the typical dementia house, I bring a Pilates ball. It's a squishy little, soft, tiny little ball that we would use like in a bar class. And they're all cuddled up in their blanket. And I walk up to them and I say, hey, will you hold this ball for me? Can you hold this? And that gets their hands out of the blanket and they're holding the ball and they squish it and palpitate it. And they're like, oh, it's warm or it's cold, or depending on time of year and where it's been in my car and whatever. And so once their hands are out of the blanket, I ask, can I have my ball back? Sure. So I get the ball and I move it to the next person and their hands come out of the blanket. And I do this fairly quickly. And now within a short period of time, 1 to 2 minutes, everybody's hands are out of the blanket. I've got them hooked. Okay. So here's how I structure the class. For some population like this, we're thinking, we'll say 75 years to 100, comfortable, not mobile, on a recliner, got a blanket on. How do I teach yoga to them? Okay. I got the hands out. So I asked them, hey, I need help. I am going to make a pie and I have no idea how to do this. Okay. So I'm tapping into their cognitive function. I'm tapping into their language. I'm tapping into their purpose, which is really the ultimate goal for me, is to help them feel that they have a meaning for their day. So we're going to make a pie. Let's pick an apple pie. And I start reaching my arms up just like this. I'm like, I am going to reach for some apples. Help me. Let's pick apples. Okay. And because of their disease, they are less inhibited by what might be silly or imaginary. And pretty soon, sure enough, they're picking apples. So I go around the room when everybody starts picking apples, and maybe it's here because we have shoulder injuries, maybe it's here because we're not sure where we're picking. Doesn't matter. Well, what color apple are you picking? Green, red, yellow. Okay, perfect. How many apples do we need? We need 8. All right, who's counting? So now I've gone from them being in their blanket, completely cocooned, to picking apples, to telling me what color apples to pick, to now telling me how many apples to pick. So I'm telling you, it's so crazy. One of the people in the group will say, we need 8 apples, for sure 8. Okay, who's counting? And I invite them to be participants in the practice. They say, we're going to pick 8 apples. So we start counting. One person starts counting. Lo and behold, we get down to 8, 8, 5, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Whew. Put your hand on your heart. Take a breath. Blow out the candle. What do we do next? Now we have this pile of apples. What do we put the apples in? We need a pie crust, says Miss Betty over here. I don't know how to make a pie crust. I have no idea how to make a pie crust. Help me. Show me what to do. And we start stirring a pie crust. Okay. I don't know what goes in a pie crust. I play ultra dumb. And pretty soon, little Susan over there in the corner says, well, you need flour and butter and salt. Perfect. Let's do another one. Flour, butter, salt. Okay. And we do this maybe 6 to 8 times because they're old, their shoulders hurt. Let's do both. Flour, butter, salt. Now, if you notice, just by watching me do this, I'm crossing that imaginary line that runs down the center of all of us called the midline. And this is what brings harmony to the hemispheres of the brain. Okay, so we have two hemispheres, left and right, and that center column that strips through the center of our brain is called the corpus callosum, and its primary job is to be a relay station for the hemispheres. Every time I take the right to the left, I'm asking some neurons to say, hey, wake up over here. Every time I move my left to my left is saying, hey, wake up. The more that I cross the midline, the more activation I have in the neurons communicating between hemispheres, which ultimately brings balance to the brain and to the body. So every session I teach, there is a version of, hey, let's make cheesecake, let's make cake and frosting, let's make a pie, let's make a pie crust, let's roll out the pie crust, let's pick apples. You can notice when I'm picking apples, I'm crossing that midline. So there's function to the movements. But here's where the magic happens. Because I'm tapping into something that historically these women, primarily women, have done for 70 years of their life, which is make a cake, make a frosting, make a pie, it becomes empowering for them who have no memory of what day or time it is to all of a sudden know that there's flour, salt, and shortening in a pie crust. And I'm high-fiving these old ladies that, heck yeah, that's exactly what goes in a pie crust. So let's do it. And we stir the pie crust, we roll the pie crust, we fill the pie crust, and then we pause and we hold our hand to our heart, we take a breath, blow out the candle. That's how I structure the warm up of my class. Okay. That's getting them involved, getting them engaged, getting them excited, getting them feeling successful. There's 4 things that happen in every single class I teach, whether you're in my studio as a typical body, or I go into a brain injury house, or I go into a dementia home. 4 things that happen. We sit in a circle because that's connection and community. I have an opportunity to connect with each student. I will say, hey, what color eyes do you have? You have blue eyes. Look at my eyes. Look at my eyes. Do you see what color my eyes are? Connection. Okay, I've gotten them out of their internal focus and into looking at me, which is the definition of yoga by nature is union. So I am uniting this individual with me. Okay, so first thing I always do in every single class is I build community. I sit in a circle. The second thing I always incorporate is movement in whatever form is available to the student, whether it's simply making a pie and making a cake, picking apples, doing something that brings joy to them. That's what I do. If it's somebody who's paralyzed from the neck down, the chest down, the shoulders down, I ask permission to move their body for them. Movement is the least important part of my time with them. And when I ask my students who have brain injuries, what do they think when they hear the word yoga? 9 out of 10 will say stretching. And that is our Western mind thinking that yoga is stretching. And the yoga that I teach is so little of stretching that it means so little to me. I love movement. I think movement's paramount, but it's so minimal into the other 7 limbs of what yoga truly is that I don't focus a lot on movement. Okay, so, but we do move as much as we can if it feels right. There have been hundreds of sessions where our yoga practice is me sitting on a coffee table, working on concentration, on pranayama, on enlightenment, on our thought patterns, on the tools that we have in our toolbox. That what do we do when we go out into the community and we're triggered? Those to me are the more important parts of yoga than a physical asana practice. Okay, so we build community, we have a little bit of movement, we do a ton of mindful breathing. Most of the individuals that I see are in extreme trauma response, extreme stress, extreme pain, extreme grief, extreme loss, and their breathing is short and shallow. And so I feel like my primary job is to see them as they are today. I don't want to know about their injury. I have no interest in knowing how they sustained a brain injury, because what I'm interested in is who they are today. If it comes up in conversation that they were beaten to a pulp and left on the middle of Lincoln Avenue, great. I need to know that. I need to know if they've had spine surgery. I need to know if they have an active aneurysm. Those are the things I need to know. The rest will come in time, but I need to know who they are today. So we do a lot of breathing, a lot of emptying out the toxins in our body through pranayama. I teach a simple pranayama. It's nothing Sanskrity. I don't bring Sanskrit into my practice because my individuals that I'm in front of are struggling to understand basic language. They don't need an egotistical yoga teacher to come in and speak Sanskrit. And that's a whole other topic that I'll touch on at some other point, why I feel so strongly against Sanskrit in my population. I feel strongly against it in the average population, but extremely against it in an accessible, adaptive setting. So we community together, we connect. I bring stories of my own life into their world. They bring stories into my world. We move a little bit, we breathe a little bit, and then the final thing that I incorporate into every single class, whether you are unable to speak a language because your brain has been so injured that you no longer can speak, is gratitude. And I believe 100% in the practice of gratitude, and I teach it in every class I teach. So the 4 pillars of what I teach, what my method is community, movement, breath, and gratitude. It's going to look different in every setting I go into. So structuring a class is going to look at reading the room. Who am I talking to? Is it somebody who has aphasia and cannot communicate back to me in words? Is it somebody who is visually impaired and can't see what I'm describing by saying, do Tadasana? What does Tadasana mean to somebody who has no vision and has a brain injury? It means nothing. But I can say, extend your arms up to the sky. Extend your arms up to the sky. That is a more accessible form of Tadasana, which is ridiculous to assume that somebody with a traumatic brain injury and living in a group home would know. The average yogi may not even know it. Like, it's just silly to think Sanskrit has a place. I think it has no place in our Western world unless you are extremely skilled in Sanskrit. Otherwise, it becomes a fine line of being egoic. So, another talk. I could be on a soapbox, as you can tell. So, that's how I structure my class. I walk in, if everybody's cuddled up in a blanket, I get my ball out. I say, hey, can I hold your hands? Can I hold your hands? Look at my eyes. What color are my eyes? Talk to me. Show me your eyes. Can I see your eyes? I want to see the color of your eyes. Now I have their hands. I've given them human connection. I'm giving them touch. I've given them a reason to take their hands out of the blanket, which is to hold my hands for a minute. I need you. And then I start making up this crazy story that I need help making a cake or a pie. Now I have them hooked. Then I teach a simple sequence, and I'm happy to teach that. Maybe next month I'll teach you my basic sequence. that brings nature into their experience. For most of these people, they're homebound. They haven't seen nature except through a window in years and years and years. So I bring nature into their experience through a sequence. And it's a 35, 40-minute class. And then we finish with going around the room. I hold their hands and I say, can you tell me what you're thankful for? Most of the people will say, I'm thankful for my family and friends. And I will ask them, why? What do they bring to you? How do they make you feel? Because that's a deeper feeling and a deeper level thinking than just the automatic response that we all have. I'm grateful for my family, my friends, my house, my job, my dog, my cat. We all have that. But what is it that makes us feel grateful for those things? For me, my home brings me safety. My family brings me connection. My friends bring me encouragement and strength. And my animals bring me comfort. So I encourage my students, regardless of their age or ability, to say why. Why? What does your family give to you? And it's not that like I'm poking a sore wound, but I want them to tap into the intrinsic feeling of being connected, being belonged, feeling as though they matter, and then tapping into their memory center of I have great children or I have grandchildren and they bring me joy. Okay. So those are the four things I bring into every class. Structuring them depends on reading the room. If I'm working with a population in a home that's strictly brain injuries, it's going to take a little bit of tweaking, and I'm happy through this process to share what I've known. And I became so enthralled by the brain, and the differences between a traumatic brain injury is so individual that maybe 5 years ago I became a brain injury specialist, which required a lot of studies to be able to understand the different lobes of the brain, what happens when that particular lobe is injured, how that reflects in their abilities, um, the comorbidity of addiction, mental health, PTSD in many of the people who are living with traumatic brain injuries. It was a huge undertaking. And I'm really proud that I became a brain injury specialist because I feel like I understand the brain better than I did before I went through the testing. It was hard. I failed it once and I had to redo it, and it was humbling, but it gave me such an insight as to the brain. So I think that's really important when you work with somebody with traumatic brain injuries to know that their injuries are so unique as they are, and that you might have somebody who has an injury similar in the same area of the brain, but it's going to present very, very different. So understanding brain injuries is something I hope to talk about more, because it's not just for something in a 45-minute session that we can dice out. It's very individual, and there's a lot of different strategies that I hope to teach you in the coming months on how to walk into that when you're presented with somebody whose entire face has been shot off in an assault. What do you do with that? Okay. And so there's a whole level of what you as a guide or a teacher or a practitioner or a healer, whatever term you choose to call yourself, what you need to do with that. And I want to touch on that a little bit as we go forward. So TBIs are complex, they're individual as we are individual beings. And so it takes a lot. And that's something that you need experience with and trial and error. I'm happy to talk to you about that. So one of the poll questions that I had was empathy versus sympathy. And I'm grateful that I'm not an empath. I can show empathy, I have empathy, but I am not an empath. I do not feel the feelings and the pain that other people have for their experience as humans, which is a blessing in my work. I can walk into a home of people who have traumatic brain injuries. Each one of them has a unique experience of trauma. I have people who have been hit by a car walking on a sidewalk in suburbia. I've had people who have been assaulted, motor vehicle accidents, gunshots, self-inflicted and other inflicted. I have a student who's a female who's close to my age who was line dancing with girlfriends on a Saturday night and slipped on water and hit the back of her head and is blind and in a wheelchair. I have women who have multiple brain tumors. I mean, the range is endless, and I could spend an hour talking to you about each of my students and their own unique stories. But the message that I want to convey is that it takes an understanding that we can be empathetic for their experience, and we can say, I feel you. I feel you. And I'm so sorry that this has happened to you, versus I feel so bad for you. Oh my God, that's so sad. Total different energy. I feel you, and I'm so sorry this happened to you, versus I feel so bad for you. Oh, that's terrible. That's sympathy. And in my opinion, this work has no place for sympathy. We are here to serve, we are here to be empathetic, compassionate, and serving. We're not here to feel bad for people. And if you're an empath, this may not be the right niche for you. It may not be something that you can do, because it's hard work to sit with somebody who has lost everything they worked their life for at the hands of somebody else's negligence. It is incredibly hard. It's hard for me, and I'm not an empath. It is really hard to walk out that door, get in my car, and go on to the next and not feel. Okay. So if that hurts you physically, emotionally, spiritually, I just invite you to either look at it, can I do this work clear? Can I do this work with the right intention? And can I protect myself and those I love from that type of energy? So I have amazing tools that I've learned along the way to discharge that energy, so I don't bring it home, so I don't carry it in my body, so I don't get attached. I have amazing boundaries, but it's taken a lot of deliberate work to make that happen. I never want to give the message that I feel sorry for someone. I want to feel that their experience is shitty, that it's crappy that this has happened, and that I'm so sorry, but I don't ever want to feel sorry for someone. And there's a fine line between empathy and sympathy. Okay, so the last topic that came up were scenarios in long term care centers or facilities, communities, whatever you want to call them. And the scenarios are this: you walk in, staff is underpaid, undertrained, overwhelmed, don't want to be there, minimum wage workers, young, no offense on young people. They haven't lived, they haven't suffered, they haven't worked hard. This is bucket listing everybody into one thing. But typically you get people who are in that category where they're just there for the paycheck. And so you walk in with your heart open, the heart on the chest, with all the good intentions. You're ready to teach an amazing yoga class, and staff could care less if you're there, much less get the people out of the bed, get them toileted, get them fed, get them ready, get them in their chair. And so you have to go in knowing that you are fighting against the norm. You're fighting against a culture that they've created in their own little home, and you are an invader to their culture, because more times than not, their culture is plop the people in front of the TV and go sit in the office and do whatever you need to do, whether that's work or check your phone or call your family or zone out. Okay. So an intruder like me comes into a long term care facility, and I'm asking them to get people toileted, dressed, fed, and ready by 9:45. I call when I'm on my way. I'm an intruder to their comfort zone. So that's a barrier. That's a scenario that exists every single time. And I've been doing this for a long time in the same homes. I'm still an intruder to their normal everyday existence where they do nothing but watch TV. So I'm the intruder. So I have to work my way onto the good side of the staff so that they see that I'm a benefit to them, that I'm taking their residents for 45 minutes off of their responsibility. Unless somebody is a high risk, I'm fine being by myself with the people. Ideally, I would love for staff to join me because the tools that I teach the residents can be transferred over into other settings if staff is on board. 99% of the time, staff is not going to participate. They're not going to sit in. They're not going to support you. They're not going to have any care at all of what you're doing 99% of the time. So that's on you to be able to feel comfortable dealing with a seizure risk, a fall risk, a flight risk, somebody who's paralyzed and is on a G tube, a feeding tube, or somebody who has a catheter bag that might be leaking onto the floor. These are all scenarios that happen every single day in long-term care. You have to be willing and able to handle that, because staff is not going to go be like, oh, it's yoga time, let's join in. They're busy, they're cleaning, they're cooking, they're changing beds, they're helping other residents. They're not going to be thinking you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. In fact, you are going to be the opposite of that. It's rare for me to be welcomed in. So going into supported living, long-term care, group homes, I have to edge myself in slowly and carefully, build trust with the staff, and hope that the residents feel so good about the work that I'm doing that I become not a threat to the staff, because staff gets really attached to their people. And it's hard when somebody new comes in who here's the problem with long-term care. They're doing 12-hour shifts. They're cleaning toilets, they're changing beds, they're changing diapers, they're changing wounds, they're changing catheter bags. And I come in as pretty little yoga Stacie. Hey, I'm here for 45 minutes of goodness, and I leave. So there's resentment that comes into play, that I get to come in and the residents love me, love spending time with me. I can get residents to do things that staff can't do because I'm not doing a 12-hour shift. I'm not the mom. And so there's resentment. It's human nature for us to resent something that other people do easily. Okay. So over the 16 years of doing this, I've just learned to wash it down my back. Like, it's not about me, it's not about them. I'm here to serve my residents, I'm here to serve the people. And if this staff member has a problem with me, it's probably them and not me. If it is me, I'm willing to look at it. Totally willing to look at it. If I'm overstepping my boundaries, if I'm overstepping their roles or my roles, totally willing to own that. But 9 times out of 10, they're in front of the television. I come in, I can get the television off and get the people moving within minutes. But that's because of the method that I've developed that I feel so strongly about. So there's going to be scenarios between staff, there's going to be resident issues, there's going to be space. Like, where do you teach a yoga class in a home with 10 people living with dementia? You do it in the living room and you plop yourself onto a kitchen table or a coffee table or a chair, and you corral them into some resemblance of a circle, and you work the room. You work the room as if you're standing in a studio. It's no different. You just have to be willing to get out of this head that it has to be perfect Zen environment, because in the homes I'm at, I'm in the living room, I'm on a coffee table sitting cross-legged, and somebody's cooking lunch just behind the recliners. The dogs that live in the home are barking nonstop at me. The dogs are stealing my yoga straps out of my bag. Somebody's over here crying. Somebody's wanting chocolate ice cream. Like, it's mayhem. And my job is to bring order to the mayhem. And I do that by being very animated, very interactive. Here, hold my hand, hold my hand. Hey, wait, hold my hand. Okay, talk to me. Hey, what makes you happy? And then I have them. I have them because I'm holding their hands, I'm looking in their eyes, and I'm asking them about them. I have them for a moment, and then I go to the next one and I say the same thing, or I say, I can't remember, was it flour, sugar, or was it salt? And I have them. And then we gather back up again and I do the thing. I do the sequence. I do whatever I'm there to do. And then we close with gratitude. Some of my students who have brain injuries are completely paralyzed. My job is to move their body for them with permission. I ask permission. Is it okay if I touch you? Can I hold your hand? Can I move your body? Can you let me know if this hurts? Many of my students with brain injuries, our yoga practice is me rubbing their feet. I plop down on the floor, I take off their socks, their toenails have not seen a clipper in decades, and I have to overlook that. My job is to be in union with them. My job is to connect with them, to have them feel a sensation that they may not feel otherwise. My job is to bring concentration to them, enlightenment, to bring a sense of wholeness and well being. All of the other aspects of yoga that have nothing to do with asana, that's my job. So I posted a graphic in the group I think yesterday about, if I don't teach a pose, am I still teaching yoga? And I say 100% yes. In fact, the pose is the least important, in my opinion, part of the practice for this population. Maybe for all populations, but since we're talking adaptive yoga, that's my spiel. So those are kind of the points in the poll that I wanted to touch on. The difference between accessible, adaptive, and love your brain yoga. So we have accessible, which teaches a traditional practice accessible to anybody using a chair or a bolster or a block or a strap or a wall. Love Your Brain is bringing people with traumatic brain injuries into a studio for a somewhat traditional practice. And then the style of yoga that I teach is taking yoga into facilities for people who cannot access. Structuring the yoga class is based on reading the room. Who are you in front of? What's your intent? Is your intent to connect with them, to build language, to build empowerment, to build connection? Is it to increase flexibility? Probably not a priority with this population. Maybe balance, for sure. We want to work on balance for all populations. So we cross the midline. We bring harmony to the hemispheres of the brain by simply making an X or making a cake, stirring a pie, picking apples. We talked a little bit about the complexities of traumatic brain injuries, and then the point of empathy versus sympathy. And what do we do with that feeling that we have? Yes, this is really crappy. This is horrible that this human being was beaten and left for dead. How do we not feel that and not feel extreme empathy and maybe even sympathy? But when we're in front of them, we can't show, I feel so bad for you. This is so horrible. We have to just be able to say, I'm so sorry this happened, but I'm here to serve. I'm here to help you. I'm here to show you. And I don't say those things. I don't say, I'm here to show you how to be empowered and whole. I just hope that my message gives them that feeling of empowerment and wholeness. And then different scenarios that you come across in long-term care. Those are the biggest ones: the staph resistance, the smells, the sights that you see, catheter bags, faces shot off, grief, loss. And then you have staff. Again, staff's really hard. I mean, they're wonderful people who are doing hard work, but in a home that's so intimate, you're an intruder to that culture, and it takes time to build trust to be able to be part of that culture. So to not take things personal and to just go in with the heart of service and to do what you're there to do, and not think about the interference. And if you feel so strongly that this is something that you need to do or want to do with your life or your time or part-time or full-time or once a week or once a month, then you have to be willing to just go past the interference because it's so worth it. And it's the greatest job I could ever have created for myself. And it's what I'm here to do. I have no doubt whatsoever that I've been given a gift, and I want to share the gift. I want to empower other yoga teachers to step into their own gift, because I think we all have a gift, and it's getting out of the thinking mind of what it should be, what yoga should be in our Western world, or what I should be doing for somebody. And it's really not about that. It's a partnership between you and your student. And really, all you're doing is opening a door for them to find themselves. You're not the healer, they're their own healer. You're just showing the way. And when we get out of the thinking that we are there to serve and to help and to heal, when we get out of that way, then magic happens. And we find that partnership between two spirits wanting the same thing. So it's something to check at the door, which is your ego, of what your intent is, and to really find that there is a unique and beautiful spiritual partnership that happens with every student that you're in front of, even if they are visually impaired, have a traumatic brain injury, and are completely immobile and cannot do one posture. There is a definite opening for yoga for them. And you might just be the conduit to open up that place within them where they find union with the new body and the new spirit that they have. And that's beautiful work. That's beautiful work. That has nothing to do with touching your toes or modifying pigeon pose to a seated chair pigeon. Nothing to do with it whatsoever. So I'm hoping that you'll stay with me, continue to ask questions, open the conversation to the possibility that yoga doesn't have to be about asana and physical and modifying certain poses or creating a sequence that mimics a traditional practice, because that's just one tiny bit of the practice that I think we miss. So I hope to continue the conversation. I'm planning on doing once a month, every first Wednesday of every month at this time at 7 p.m. So I'm going to stop the recording here in a second. I'll post it onto the group, and then I hope the conversation begins. And I hope that we can talk about some questions, and hopefully you have some. And then I look forward to meeting with you, whether it's on Zoom or individually, and just continuing to learn from you too. You know, I've done this a long time and I have a great method and I get it, but I am open to learning and seeing what works for you and how you adapt this beautiful practice into your own community. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the class, and then I will talk to you very, very soon. And we'll just keep this conversation going in the coming months, and hopefully something evolves from it where somebody maybe wants to step in and shadow me and take over some of my homes and help me out in spreading the love, because it's exhausting. And I think that wherever you are in the world or the country, you can take some of these teachings and turn it into your own in your own community, and it's a ripple effect that just keeps going and going. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, and I will talk to you soon. So thanks for popping in, and let's just keep it going. All right, I'll see you soon. Thanks so much.